Hi, we're not on the range today, we're at one of our training facilities. Recently we did a presentation on the Fort Scott Munitions Tumble Upon Impact, that's TUI ammunition in caliber 9x19 with an 80 grain all copper spear point projectile. So the guys at Garner's in Pendleton, Oregon gave me a box of Fort Scott Munitions TUI ammunition 38 Special Plus P with an 81 grain all copper spear point projectile and asked me to test it out. So here we are. So we're going to start by doing some accuracy evaluation, and I'm going to shoot this target from 12 yards. But we're going to do something a little bit differently today. While I'm shooting that target at 12 yards, it will be 5 yards behind the chronograph, which I'll shoot from a distance of 7 yards. And I'm going to shoot at the chronograph from 7 yards because the FBI spent decades telling us that 7 yards was the mean distance for a lethal confrontation. And the handgun I'm going to use today will be my Smith & Wesson Model 638 in caliber 38 Special, and it has a 1 7/8 inch barrel. I'm going to use this handgun because these days when people are carrying revolvers for concealed carry or personal protection, it's usually a snub nose. Also, I'll typically shoot double action when I'm shooting past the chronograph, but because I want to get as precise a hits on the target as I can, I'm actually going to shoot this in single action mode. So let's see how we do. $1,010. $1,107. $1,062. $1,113. Error 3. That's a common failing in chronographs like this. So I'm going to load up a couple more rounds and see if we can get some more readings. $1,116. $1,121. Now let's take a look at the target. Well, here's our group, and that's 7 rounds. This hit right here is a double. Now we've got a couple of flyers, so our group is basically right here. Now normally when I have a couple of flyers, I'll say that's just me. In this case, I'm not so sure that it is. Before we ever got started, I fired a few rounds of this and had a couple of flyers on it. So I'm not sure this ammunition is all that accurate out of this particular handgun. However, given what it's designed for, and since we are shooting 12 yards, I'm going to say this is acceptable accuracy. Now let's go crunch our chronograph numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, we got a mean velocity of 1,088 feet per second. Now that might sound like a lot for a 38 Special Plus P coming out of a 1 7/8 inch barrel, but remember these are 81 grain projectiles. And speaking of the projectiles, let me show you a close-up of what this ammunition looks like. Here's our 81 grain projectile, which I was calling a spear point that they call a tumble upon impact design, and if you look really close, the tip of it is flat. So let's see how this 38 ammo performs against our meat target. Now there's two very important things. One, we are not comparing the Fort Scott TUI 38 Special Plus P ammunition to the Fort Scott TUI 9x19 ammunition because, two, it wouldn't be a fair comparison because of the anatomy of our meat target. This particular meat target is beef tripe skin, beef steak pectoral, beef ribs, a bag of grapefruit to simulate lung tissue, more beef ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers of t-shirt on the back, the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech police bullet stop, and it's wearing 3A body armor. Typically I use pork products because I consider them more analogous to the intended target, but I'm using beef today because Walmart didn't have any pork products in stock. So I'll shoot this from 7 yards with the Smith & Wesson Model 638, loaded with our Fort Scott Munitions Tumble Upon Impact 38 Special Plus P 81 grain all copper spear point projectile, and let's see what kind of results we get. Here's our meat target, and here's our 3A body armor that we tore up looking for the projectiles. This 3A body armor stopped 4 of the 5 projectiles, and the one that did go through only penetrated a little bit. Let me show you a close-up of what these projectiles look like now. One has almost no deformation at all. The others are all blunted just a little bit. So now I'll shoot this meat target from 7 yards without the body armor, and we'll see if these projectiles really do tumble upon impact. Well, here's our beef pectoral. Yeah, it was a pretty beefy meat target, but we just see round holes through that. The ribs on the front of the target, where the projectiles went between the ribs, just made a round hole. Where a projectile hit a rib, shattered it. That was pretty impressive. As far as our grapefruit lung tissue, we see some damage to one, but on most of them I just see round holes through them. And all of the projectiles were stopped by the ribs on the back of the target. Now let's take a close-up look at these projectiles. And here's our 4 projectiles, and we see virtually no deformation to any of them. So the takeaways from all of this, mainly 3 things. 1, this is an 81 grain projectile, and it had a lot less felt recoil than what someone might typically have in their snub 38, like 38 Special Plus P with 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. But if you really needed lower recoil ammunition in your snub 38, I think there's better choices than this. 2, this is a non-expanding projectile. Now, some people would say that could be applicable for living in jurisdictions where you're prohibited from having expanding projectiles. If you live in such a jurisdiction, I think you could be better served by a semi-wad cutter or something like the Underwood Extreme Penetrator ammunition. 3rd, some people would say this could be applicable for defeating soft body armor. Well, 2 things there. 1, it didn't do that. And 2, if you really thought you were going to have to face an adversary that was wearing soft body armor, you might want to choose a gun different than this one. So the real bottom line to this ammunition is, it's not the right ammo for me. Is it the right ammo for you? You be the judge. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Fort Scott Munitions TUI 38 Special Plus P 81 grain all copper spear point ammunition video.